1975. Morocco. A 21-year-old Australian named Geoff Lawton is camping on beaches north of Agadir with friends. They've been surfing for weeks. Locals tell them about Paradise Valley, 5,000-foot vistas, blue-green waterfalls, lush vegetation in the middle of the desert. They drive inland. Barren landscape, mud brick homes. The air is dry and hot. 20 kilometers in, they stop at a tiny village called Irrigation for directions. Lawton steps out to relieve himself. He walks into what he thinks is a roadside wood. And everything changes. The air suddenly feels cool, almost misty. He's staring at bananas, oranges, figs, pomegranates, lemons, grapes, all growing wild in the shade of massive date palms. He follows a footpath through grassy understory. Olive trees, argan trees, vegetable gardens everywhere, goats tethered to posts, chickens roosting in trees. Then he spots a man leading a donkey down a leafy corridor. The saddlebags are overflowing with fresh produce. Lawton later described the moment like this. I felt like I'd wandered into some kind of ancient organism. I had goosebumps all over. What he'd stumbled into was a 65-acre food forest. Not planted last year. Not planted last century. Scientists estimate this living, breathing, food-producing ecosystem has been continuously feeding families for at least 2,000 years. Some believe it's even older. When villagers are asked about the forest's age, they just shrug. I have no idea, says one local farmer. But I know it has been here for centuries. 800 people were farming this communal space in the 1970s. Fed by underground springs. Shaped by human hands since time immemorial. The image of a true oasis. And it's still in use today. Still producing. Still feeding families. 2,000 years later. Today I'm going to show you how ancient civilizations created self-sustaining food systems that lasted for millennia, why these systems vanished from most of the world, and why modern science is now desperately trying to bring them back before it's too late. Because what Geoff Lawton discovered in Morocco that day wasn't a miracle. It was a blueprint. A blueprint that could solve food insecurity, reverse desertification, and sequester more carbon than any technology we've invented. Let's go. Before we talk about what makes these ancient food forests so special, we need to understand what they actually are. Because when most people hear forest, they think wilderness. Untouched nature. Random trees. But that's not what we're talking about. A food forest is a deliberately designed, multi-layered ecosystem that mimics natural forest structure while producing massive amounts of human food. Imagine a natural forest. Now imagine every plant in that forest was chosen by humans over centuries specifically because it feeds people, improves soil, supports beneficial insects, or serves some other critical function. That's what Lawton saw in Morocco. The top layer, the canopy, was date palms, 30 to 40 feet tall. Those palms served at least four purposes. First, they thrive in harsh desert environments and provide massive amounts of shade. Second, when planted close together, they create a cooling effect that drops interior temperatures by 10 to 15 degrees. Third, their tall, limbless trunks give other plants space to grow underneath and serve as natural trellises for vines. Fourth, their long taproots retrieve water hidden deep in the soil that shorter-rooted plants can't access. Beneath the date palms, a second layer of fruit and nut trees. Figs, pomegranates, olives, argan, citrus. These trees benefit from the shade and access the moisture brought up by the palm roots through a process called hydraulic lift. Their leaves fall and build the soil. Their roots prevent erosion. Below that, shrubs and vines. Grapes climbing the palm trunks. Berry bushes in the dappled sunlight. Herbs scattered throughout. At ground level, vegetables, herbs, medicinal plants, all growing in rich, moist soil created by centuries of falling leaves and organic matter. And woven through the entire system, animals. Chickens eating unwanted insects and providing eggs. Goats clearing brush and providing milk and manure. The manure fertilizes everything. The result? A system that produces food 12 months a year with almost no external inputs. No irrigation beyond what the springs provide. No fertilizer beyond what the animals and falling leaves create. No pesticides because beneficial insects keep pests in check naturally. And it's been doing this for 2,000 years. Now here's what blows my mind. This wasn't unique to Morocco. Before colonization and modern agriculture, food forests were everywhere. Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Central America, the Amazon, the Caribbean islands. Anthropologists now believe that nearly every indigenous culture on Earth developed some version of this technology independently. And we're not talking about small gardens feeding a handful of people. We're talking about massive, sophisticated systems that fed entire civilizations. In the Amazon rainforest, scientists used to think the poor soil could only support small villages. The mainstream narrative was that Amazonians lived in scattered, primitive settlements because the jungle couldn't sustain large populations. But recent archaeological and paleobotanical research has completely shattered that assumption. Researchers now believe the Amazon was home to large, complex societies potentially numbering in the tens of thousands or more. And they didn't clear the forest to plant European-style crop fields. They transformed the forest itself into a food-producing system. They cultivated orchards that stretched for thousands of square miles. When European diseases and colonization decimated these populations, the jungle simply reclaimed the settlements. And Europeans looked at the overgrown ruins and assumed they were seeing pristine wilderness. But it wasn't wilderness. It was an abandoned garden. Anthropologist William Bully argues that the Amazon rainforest as we know it today is largely a human artifact, modified over millennia by indigenous forest gardening techniques. Research in New Guinea revealed that people as early as 30 to 40,000 years ago were manipulating forests by trimming, thinning, and ring-barking trees to increase natural stands of taro, bananas, and yams. 30,000 years ago. That's not primitive. That's sophisticated ecological management that predates written history. In Mexico, the Maya developed forest gardens they called family orchards. In Java, they were known as gardens of complete design. In Sri Lanka, forest gardens. In Kerala, India, home gardens. Different names. Same concept. Multi-layered, perennial food systems that worked with nature instead of against it. These systems supported some of the largest civilizations in human history. And then they almost completely vanished. So what happened? How did a technology that sustained humanity for thousands of years get nearly wiped out in just a few centuries? The answer is colonization and industrialization. When Europeans colonized the Caribbean, for example, food forests were likely the primary method of agriculture. But sugarcane production wiped them out almost entirely. A few plantation owners noticed the systems could cheaply feed their workforce and maintain small plots. But the vast majority were destroyed to make room for monoculture cash crops. The same pattern repeated across the globe. Indigenous food forests were viewed as primitive, inefficient, and chaotic by colonizers who valued orderly rows of single crops. The complex, multi-species systems that had fed people for millennia were cleared to plant cotton, sugarcane, coffee, rubber, and other export commodities. Then came the Green Revolution in the mid-20th century. Massive application of artificial fertilizers and pesticides. Mechanized production techniques reliant on fossil fuels. Genetically engineered crops. Monocultures everywhere you looked. Agriculture became an industry focused on maximizing the output of single crops rather than the health and resilience of entire systems. And it worked. For a while, crop yields exploded. Food became cheap and abundant in developed countries. But the costs were catastrophic. Topsoil erosion, desertification, deforestation, massive carbon emissions, irrigation-induced water shortages, pollution from pesticide runoff, loss of biodiversity, and farmer dependence on expensive inputs like synthetic fertilizer, genetically modified seeds, and industrial equipment. American farmers used to plant nutrient-intensive cash crops like cotton year after year until they depleted the soil so badly that nothing would grow at all. Then they'd abandon that land and move on to destroy new land. We lost entire regions to soil exhaustion before we figured out crop rotation. But here's the thing. While all this was happening, those ancient food forests that survived, they kept producing. No fertilizer, no pesticides, no irrigation systems, no fossil fuels, just sunlight, rainfall, human management, and time. Cut back to Geoff Lawton in Morocco. That experience in 1975 stayed with him for years. He couldn't shake it. He went back to Australia, started a cleaning business. Then in 1979, his girlfriend told him about a guy named Bill Mollison who was launching something called the Permaculture Institute. Mollison had just co-authored a radical book called Permaculture 1, a perennial agriculture for human settlements. The core idea was simple. Modern agriculture is destroying the planet. We need to return to sustainable, perennial-based systems that sequester carbon and work with natural ecosystems instead of against them. In other words, food forests. When Lawton read the book's title and realized Mollison was writing about what he'd seen in Morocco, he describes it like a bolt of lightning. Within a year, he was attending classes at Mollison's Institute. By 1985, he was a certified permaculture instructor buying 30 acres in rural Australia. And then he made history. Because everyone was talking about establishing food forests, but nobody had actually done anything substantial. Lawton needed visual examples. Photos showing step-by-step implementation. What these systems would look like 1 year in, 5 years in, 10 years in. So he transformed his farm into a working model food forest. The strategy worked. By the early 1990s, food forest designs were selling. In 1997, Mollison retired and asked Lawton to assume directorship of the Permaculture Institute. And Lawton used that platform to push the envelope. He thought, what's the craziest thing we could do with this technology? And his mind returned to Morocco. The answer was, establish a food forest in the desert. The result was the Greening the Desert project. Beginning in 1999, Lawton set out to establish a food forest demonstration site in Jordan, about 2 kilometers north of the Dead Sea. The site was 400 meters below sea level. Midsummer temperatures hit 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Soils were salty. Rainfall averaged less than 6 inches per year. Lawton says it was the toughest project he'd ever worked on. Nothing of that scale had ever been attempted. The only model he had was in Rarin. The before photos of the area look like Mars. Barren. Lifeless. Not a single plant visible. But follow the progress photos through the years, and you witness the birth of an oasis. Within a decade, the site was producing figs, pomegranates, dates, guavas, citrus, grapes, and dozens of vegetables, all in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The media coverage from Greening the Desert helped reintroduce food forests to the world. More importantly, it proved their viability. If you can grow a food forest in the Jordanian desert, you can grow one almost anywhere. So let's talk about why these systems work so incredibly well. What's the secret? How does a food forest produce abundant food for centuries or even millennia with minimal inputs? The answer is biomimicry and ecological succession. Food forests mimic the structure and function of natural forests. And natural forests are the most successful, most resilient, most productive ecosystems on the planet. In a natural forest, every plant occupies a specific niche. Tall trees capture sunlight. Their roots mine deep nutrients and bring them to the surface. Their leaves fall and build soil. Shorter trees fill the gaps. Shrubs grow in the understory. Vines climb the trunks. Ground covers prevent erosion. Fungi decompose organic matter and make nutrients available to plant roots. Insects pollinate flowers and aerate soil. Birds eat pests and spread seeds. Nothing is wasted. Every output from one element becomes input for another. The system is closed-loop and self-sustaining. Food forests replicate this. But instead of random wild plants, humans select species that serve multiple functions and produce human food. The result is a system that improves over time rather than degrading. Compare that to modern agriculture. A cornfield is ecological devastation. You clear every plant except corn. You kill every insect except pollinators you truck in. You prevent all natural succession. You mine nutrients from the soil and replace them with synthetic fertilizer derived from fossil fuels. You spray pesticides that kill beneficial organisms along with pests. The system degrades every single year. And you're locked into an input-dependent cycle that never ends. A food forest does the opposite. Year 1, you plant. Year 2, the system starts producing small amounts of food while building soil. Year 3, production increases. By year 5 or 10, you're harvesting significant yields. By year 20, the system is incredibly productive and almost entirely self-maintaining. The soil gets richer every year from falling leaves and animal manure. Beneficial insects establish populations. Birds nest in the trees and control pests. The roots prevent erosion and create channels for water infiltration. The canopy shades the soil and reduces evaporation. Nitrogen-fixing plants fertilize their neighbors. And unlike annual crops that you replant every single year, perennial systems just keep going. The date palms in Morocco have been producing for centuries. Some of those trees are probably older than the United States of America, and they're still cranking out fruit. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds great for Morocco or the Amazon. But what about cold climates? What about places with real winters? Here's the thing. Food forests adapt to any climate. You just select different species. In Morocco, the canopy is date palms. In temperate climates, you use nut trees, chestnuts, walnuts, hickories, hazelnuts, oak trees for acorns. These provide the tall canopy layer. Below that, fruit trees, apples, pears, plums, cherries, persimmons, pawpaws, mulberries. These fill the mid-story. Shrub layer, berries, currants, gooseberries, elderberries, blueberries, serviceberries, honeyberries. Ground layer, perennial vegetables, asparagus, rhubarb, sorrel, perennial onions, herbs, medicinal plants. And don't forget the vine layer. Grapes, kiwis, hardy kiwis, hops. Britain's oldest forest garden was established in the north of Scotland on the Scottish borders. If food forests work in Scotland, they work almost anywhere. The key is mimicking natural forest structure with regionally appropriate species. And every region on Earth has native forests, which means every region can support food forests. So where are we now? What's happening with food forests today? The movement is exploding. As of 2018, more than 70 food forests had been installed in public spaces throughout the United States alone. Seattle's Beacon Food Forest covers 7 acres and features more than 40 species of fruit and nut trees and upward of 100 varieties of herbs and vegetables, depending on season. It's open to the public and completely free. Atlanta built the largest free food forest in the United States. 2,500 plants available for anyone to harvest. Oakland, Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia. Major cities are installing food forests in low-income neighborhoods and food deserts to provide community programming, urban greenways, and access to better nutrition. But the real potential isn't urban gardens. It's commercial agriculture. Because while urban food forests raise awareness and feed local communities, the massive environmental and economic benefits come when farmers start integrating forest gardening techniques into large-scale production. Imagine instead of planting endless rows of corn, a farmer plants rows of corn with nitrogen-fixing trees interspersed. The trees provide shade, reduce erosion, eliminate the need for synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, provide habitat for beneficial insects and birds, and produce nuts as a secondary crop. The system becomes more productive, more efficient, more profitable, and dramatically better for the environment. Agricultural scientists call this agroforestry, and it's rapidly gaining traction. Major universities now offer agroforestry programs. The USDA provides grants and technical assistance for farmers transitioning to agroforestry systems. Research consistently shows these integrated systems outperform monocultures in total output, profitability, and environmental impact. One agricultural professor put it this way: once upon a time, American farmers planted nutrient-intensive cash crops like cotton year in and year out until they depleted the soil and nothing would grow at all. We now know crop rotation would have maintained the soil. Today, that's the dominant model. 50 to 100 years from now, I hope the same will be true for agroforestry. But here's the tragic irony. At the exact same time that advocates are promoting food forests as the future of agriculture, historic examples like in Raran are dying. Increased tourism in Morocco has brought paved roads, running water, electricity, and better access to produce markets. Young people are drawn to cities for education and better work. Those who stay focus on argan oil production and tourism rather than maintaining the food forest. The shift toward monoculture is disrupting the sensitive ecosystem. The soil is beginning to deplete. Older residents continue to rely on the forest for most of their food, but the knowledge of how to properly manage the system is disappearing as village elders pass away. One 68-year-old farmer named Mohammed Daka said, "This forest provides almost all of my family's food. For us, it is sacred. I only hope our young people leave, study, make something of themselves, then come back. My wish is that they will be capable of watching over this land." Geoff Lawton has urged governments to recognize and preserve indigenous food forests as natural historical landmarks. But time is running out. As youths migrate to cities and management practices are lost, ancient systems that fed people for millennia are being logged, developed, or simply abandoned. The knowledge humanity spent thousands of years accumulating is vanishing in a single generation. Let me bring this full circle. Research in New Guinea shows humans have been managing food forests for 30 to 40,000 years. The Amazon's forests were modified and managed for millennia. Morocco's Inrarian food forest has been producing for at least 2,000 years. These aren't accidents. These aren't flukes. These are proven, time-tested systems that represent humanity's most successful and sustainable approach to food production. And we nearly lost them. We came within a generation or two of losing all that knowledge completely, because we decided that rows of corn made more sense than working with nature, because we believed controlling ecosystems was smarter than cooperating with them. But those ancient food forests that survived kept producing. Through wars, through climate shifts, through political upheavals, through everything. They just kept feeding people, because they were designed to work with natural systems instead of against them. Modern agriculture gave us cheap food. But at what cost? Massive topsoil loss, dead zones in our oceans from fertilizer runoff, collapsing insect populations from pesticides, desertification, deforestation, farmer dependence on expensive inputs and corporate seed companies, and catastrophic carbon emissions driving climate change. Food forests offer a different path, one that builds soil instead of depleting it, that sequesters carbon instead of releasing it, that increases biodiversity instead of destroying it, that becomes more productive over time instead of requiring increasing inputs just to maintain yields. And the technology isn't theoretical. It's not some futuristic dream. It's ancient. It's proven. It works. We just forgot about it for a while. So here's your homework. If you have any outdoor space at all, start thinking in layers. Plant a fruit tree. Underplant it with berry bushes. Add some perennial herbs and vegetables at ground level. Let them work together. Watch what happens. If you don't have space, support community food forests in your area. Volunteer. Donate. Advocate for your city to install them in public spaces. And if you're a farmer or know farmers, learn about agroforestry. The USDA has resources. Universities have extension programs. The economic and environmental benefits are overwhelming. Because here's the truth. We're facing food insecurity, climate change, environmental collapse, and massive soil degradation. And sitting in the desert in southern Morocco is a 2,000-year-old solution that still works perfectly, still feeds families, still builds soil, still sequesters carbon. We don't need to invent something new. We just need to remember what we forgot. Drop a comment and tell me if you've ever seen a food forest in person or if you're planning to start one. I want to hear your thoughts. And if this video opened your eyes to a different way of thinking about agriculture, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to see this. We're building the most resilient, most productive, most sustainable food systems possible, and I want you to be part of it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.